So Michael, touching upon something which I found to be very impactful for me, and this is Adam Grant, and he talks about diversity is good, but it isn't easy, right? And going back to the obstacles that we face as an industry, right? If again, I've had folks talk about the fact that hey, we don't quite understand what the challenges are. I mean, I had a guest of mine who had a neurodiverse candidate, and all he did was instead of having that face-to-face interview, he made it a bench seating. So the neurodiverse candidate wouldn't feel threatened or challenged in the environment, and he kicked butt, right? So the inconvenience part was just reorienting the room, getting the candidate comfortable, and then but that how do people who are not from a minority community or who haven't faced obstacles in their life, how do they experience what success means? And now, I mean, he was telling me the other day, the entire team now go and look for what is it that would help a neurodiverse candidate be more effective, right? So now it's become a kind of a cultural thing in the organization, but it took that extra step in order for that movement to take off.
Yeah, no, I mean, and applause to those individuals who are doing this. And I think this is where you mentioned Francois's article and his perspective, mentor someone who's not like yourself. And I think we have to constantly open our own mind, because we do become creatures of habit at points, right? And we really have to remove ourselves constantly from that comfort zone. And that's not simple. It's not easy to get out of your comfort zone and push yourself to think differently, do things differently. And this is that whole concept of a growth mindset, which is so important. And I think just the little things like that, go mentor folks who you wouldn't traditionally mentor and learn from them and understand them. And whether that be someone from a different country, a different background, a different, whether it be, socioeconomic, whatever the case may be, whether it be, different language, and try to understand some of the language gaps. All of those elements I think are so important. And, I've had a great opportunity to live in a few other countries outside of the United States. And, there are countries like Japan where a lot of folks say, hey, it's very difficult to acclimate there, especially for someone who's not from there. And there's some truth in that. But what I found there as well, just like anywhere else, if you open yourself up for people to understand you, and you open yourself up to understand them better, some pretty amazing things can happen. And I had incredible, just one of the best living as well as working experiences of my life in Japan, in Singapore, in the UK. And, some would argue even the cultural differences between New York and the Bay Area, right? Or California. Yeah. Just those, everyone brings a very different perspective. And, for example, for me, it's just understanding motivations as well. And, I recall a time in Japan, I had a very different perspective, and someone sat me down because we had that tone correctly. And, they sat me down and said, the challenge with your approach, and this is how they told it to me in a very kind way, is that you're telling us the solution without helping educate us and helping us go through the problem solving phase. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really powerful. I mean, that's part of the whole buy-in process, is to make it comfortable for people to to help people buy into a solution that we all come up with together, versus me just coming in and saying, hey, this is how we're going to do it. Everyone ready? Let's go. And then it never really, comes to fruition like you hope. So I think just really changing your approach, because you understand how cultures work differently or how people work differently, and how to be more effective in some of these areas. But I think absolutely things like how you recruit people and the recruitment sources you go to, how you interview them, and then once they're in, ensuring that they can be successful, because not everyone speaks up in a meeting easily. Not everyone feels as though they can give their contribution in the same way that maybe I do. And we've got to create an environment where you give people that comfort to where they're not feeling that they can't really talk and speak and have the environment to be comfortable. And I think that environment piece is really important. So applause to those folks. I think even myself personally, I have a lot to learn here, and I constantly look at ways of how I can improve, how, the whole recruitment process and the whole diversity and inclusion process, how we can make it better.
So, Michael, coming to a last question, which is something you mentioned, which is stuck in my brain the last time we spoke, is you mentioned about re-recruiting every single day, right? And talk a little bit about, I mean, like I said, it's not a phrase I've ever heard in my life, but now thinking about it, especially in this remote world, right? We're hiring people remotely, we're not seeing people maybe for years, even face to face. How does re-recruitment work, and how have you seen it actually have an impact when it comes to retention and hiring?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredible. I have two teenage kids who, to this day, I don't think appreciate my job as much as I appreciate it, right? and after about a year of us working from home through this pandemic, my daughter came to me and she said, "Hey, I finally figured out what you do every day." And I'm like, "Okay, well, enlighten me," right? She goes, "You spend a lot of time in meetings and talking." And I'm like, "Okay, and she goes, "That's it." And I'm like, I'm like, "All right." But what she didn't quite observe as much as I hoped, and hopefully she heard me doing more listening than talking. But the reason I'm on so many meetings is that you have to constantly just work, you've got to invert the triangle. And the world's not about a hierarchy anymore where, hey, and I've never had this philosophy where the team works for me. It's actually the opposite. And I know it's easy to say, but I work for the team, and my job is to sprinkle just a little bit of vision, provide a little bit of expertise where they need me, but inevitably really just to kick roadblocks out of the way, help people get their own passion on the table and get them executing in the way that they feel like they're just making a big impact, and really just sort of empowering them to get great stuff done. And that's part of re-recruiting every day. So how we empower people, one-on-one connections, town halls, constantly just sort of connecting with people in the organization and making yourself very approachable to them. And we had a very good military leader just pass away here in the United States. And I think one of his best comments that he ever made was that the moment, in his case, he was an officer, right? So the moment that soldiers stop bringing you their problems, of course I'm paraphrasing, the moment you stop being an effective leader. And it's so true. So you constantly, at least from me perspective, when I think about re-recruiting, the first philosophy I think is everyone on the team, I work for them. They don't work for me. And we're here to serve a purpose. So we become a purpose-driven organization. Everyone understands, work very hard to help people understand, and get buy-in on what is our purpose, what role do they have in helping us achieve and accomplish that purpose, and then most importantly, what do I need to do to really give them what they need to make that happen? Because at the end of the day, people can do amazing things, right? If we give them the environment to do that. So I do a lot of one-on-one time. You set up your organization with a lot of empowerment. You establish a lot of structural things to where you make it easy for people to come and have conversations with you, and you have conversations with them. And then, of course, when they bring you your problems, you have to prove yourself, and you have to live what you say you do. So if there are challenges that you need to help get roadblocks out of the way, it's so important to do those things. And when you clear those out and make people empowered, and then give them the ability to make the impact that they want to create, that's part of re-recruiting every day. And suddenly it just, your recruitment and your attrition problems do change. And I've seen that over my career.
Yeah, and I've heard that so many times about just being the kind of leader that you can be, and then those two things about attrition and hiring suddenly disappear, right? And the consequences of that. And so one final thing, and again, I lied when I said that's the last question, right?
Oh, that's all right. No, I'll keep going with you, man.
So this is a leader that I know you and I talked about it, and you're going to give me a reference to him, I know. But he's been somebody that I was this close to actually getting on a podcast. I was doing podcasts back then at RSA 2019 or 18, I forget. And that is Jamil, the CISO at Equifax, right? So I know you are a huge fan of his. So talk a little bit about the kind of leader he epitomizes in a organization that got hit with one of the largest breaches, and he comes on board. regroups, retrains, and then all of the challenges that CISOs have in a front-facing organization which pretty much holds, I don't know, millions, hundreds of millions of personal information of so many Americans and overseas citizens. Let's talk a little about who Jamil is, why he does what he does, and what kind of leader he is that others can follow.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll do my best to facilitate an intro, and you can ask him those questions because
Yeah,
I think
I will.
he's going to be in the best position to say it. But I'll tell you, he is one. Talk about setting the tone. There's a couple of things about Jamil, who I think honestly is one of the most phenomenal security leaders and just leaders in general that I've been around. And what I found about him, or I find about him, is he's very much an assurance leader. Number one, and he's not he's not there to run compliance or do certain things, right? He understands these are things we have to get done. But at the end of the day, I think the reason he's so effective with his teams and with the leadership stacks that he has to plug into and the scenarios that he comes in is he really creates assurance in an organization. And it's like, hey, here's what we say we're going to do. And then here's how we're going to show how we do it and how we get there. And he sort of bridges that gap, which I think is incredibly important. And I think he's incredibly collaborative and just his ability to sort of build networks and set that tone again, right? And really just reach out. And so many times I've reached out to Jamil to say, hey, I'm struggling with this problem, or I need more help in this case. And he doesn't just give you some ideas. I mean, he'll hand you open source decks on, hey, here's how I did it, and here's some good ideas, or here's what I saw that I think works. And he does this systemically. He brings groups of people together, and he actually facilitates this in a way where we all just become smarter about being around him. And I think that's just inevitably what is so special about him. I mean, people just become smarter being around him because he connects people. He understands systems very well. And he's very much an assurance leader where he understands the power of just, getting things done that you say you're going to get done and really setting great vision around that. So I will definitely do my best. And I would love to see Jamil just educate more security leaders as we come up in the field, because he has had a huge fingerprint on my own career as well.
And those words are so great. And assurance, ultimately, that's all we need, right? Your teams need to feel assured that they have a leader who has their back. The board needs to be assured that the risk is quantified and there's a way to deal with any kinds of issues that come up. And yeah, I mean, your comrades are saying, hey, our CEO, he or she knows what they are talking about over here. And I mean, it's so powerful, right? And the way you said it about just, hey, assure people that, everything is not foolproof, but we have a handle on how to deal with situations. So amazing. So, Michael, thanks for your time and looking forward to future conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you again for the invite, and we'll thank Diane again as well. I mean, it's fantastic that I feel very honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
Likewise. Thanks, Michael.